Hi, I'm going to speak to you a little bit about ethnicity in Latin America. If someone from a foreign country was here taking classes as a foreign student, and that person asked you, what do Latin Americans look like? What would you say? Well, like the United States, Latin America is a complicated place ethnically. And very much like the United States, in urban areas, in cities, there tends to be much more mixing, much more diversity of population. And then in rural areas, there tends to be pockets or concentrations of various ethnicities, very much like the United States. What is ethnicity? Well, there are family characteristics to ethnicity, like where your family came from or what your family's background is. There's physical and cultural characteristics to it. I guess it's passed on through generations, you could say. There's national origin that some people would use as ethnicity. Or simply, I guess you could spit in the tube for Ancestry DNA and 23andMe, as I did for Ancestry DNA, and find out. In the case of me, I knew I was Irish and French. My last name is Courtier. It's a very French name. My mother was nearly 100% Irish. Her family drew directly from Ireland, so we knew that they were Irish. But we didn't know that I also had some other British Isles ancestry, and I'm Native American. Now, you wouldn't look at me and think that I'm Native American, but I'm like this much, 2% or so Native American. And that doesn't surprise me, I suppose, because my father's family had been in the United States since the beginning of the 1700s. I had an ancestor who was on the Lewis and Clark expedition. So that I had Native American ancestry was not shocking to me, but I don't think anyone would look at me and say, that person is Native American. Now, in Latin America, there has been a great amount of mixing from the time the Spanish arrived. 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. And there are, of course, indigenous people there. There's Europeans there, people of nearly or full European ancestry. There are people of African ancestry, mostly mixed. There are people of Arab ancestry. There are Asians there. There are people who are Jewish there. It's a very complicated place. But the use of the terminology I'm going to use in a moment here can be a little bit sketchy. And I just want you to know that it can be a little bit sketchy. Nevertheless, in Latin America, this terminology will be used from time to time. There are people there that we refer to as mestizos. Somebody who's a mestizo is a mix of indigenous and European ancestry. There are people who are known as mulattoes. Somebody who's a mulatto is a mix of African and European ancestry. And there are people who are known as zambos. It's not pronounced zambo because in Spanish, of course, the Z makes an S sound. And somebody who's a sambo is a mix of African and indigenous ancestry. And in Latin America, certain people are found in certain places. So it's not just mixed like butter on toast across the bread or something. It doesn't work like that. People of European ancestry, and I put this in quotes because I mean that they may very well be nearly 100% European like me, but maybe not completely 100% European, but they identify as having that sort of ancestry. People of European ancestry tend to be in urban areas, in the cities, and in the three southernmost countries, which are Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay. People who are indigenous tend to be found in the most isolated places. And the reason for that is obvious, that if they were not isolated after the Europeans got here, they were either going to die or become mestizos, one of those two things. And those isolated places are the Amazon, which is one of the most isolated places in the world, the Andes, because the Andes Mountains are high. It's a formidable boundary, and there were millions of indigenous people living there at the time the Spanish arrived, and they happened to make it. And then in Mesoamerica, which would be northern Central America and southern Mexico. And I'll go through later on in the class why that is the way it is. And then people of African ancestry, of course, were brought overwhelmingly as slaves, just as they were in the United States. And they're found in the West Indies and along the east coasts of Latin America, from Mexico all the way down to Uruguay. Yes, there are Mexicans of African ancestry. And then mestizos are found throughout Latin America. So if you look at this map on the left-hand side, you can see that all the red circles are urban areas: Mexico City, Guatemala City, Havana, San Jose, Costa Rica, Caracas, Venezuela, Bogota, Colombia, Lima, Peru, La Paz in Bolivia, Rio de Janeiro, and Sao Paulo. There's more, of course, but I'm just pointing out that these are some of the great urban centers in Latin America, and you would notice that there are people of European ancestry there. It doesn't mean that those are the only people there, but it does mean that you're going to find them there. And then in the three southern countries of Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay, which 3 white arrows are pointing towards. And then people of indigenous populations, as I said, are found in the Amazon, one of the most isolated places in the world. On the left-hand side, I've circled it for you in red. And then in the Andes Mountains, you can see sort of snaking down the side of South America. And then in the northern part of Central America and the southern part of Mexico, which is Mesoamerica. People of African ancestry are found on the islands in the West Indies, the Greater Antilles, and the Lesser Antilles, and then all along that east coast going down all the way to Uruguay. And then mestizos, as I said, are found throughout the region.